Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Energy Central Power Session. We're excited to have you with us, especially for this event. No, really, AI is already in the field. Here's what it looks like. And of course, before we begin, a big thank you to Fulcrum for making today's event possible. Let's get started. I'll hand the floor over to our moderator, Alex, to kick things off. Alex, welcome to the event. You have the floor.
Thanks, PJ. Really excited to get this conversation going. I'm Alex Maxud, your moderator. And without further ado, I just want to introduce our speakers today. First off, we got Jake Freivald. He's the VP of Product Marketing at Fulcrum. His 25-year career in software has covered multiple technology specializations with a focus on data management and analytics. He places a particular emphasis on helping business people understand the practical requirements of modernization. And then next up, we have Brian Hurst. He's the global power and utilities leader at Slalom. He brings over 28 years of experience in the utility industry, including serving as chief analytics officer at Exelon. He has delivered measurable impact for over 50 utilities through digital transformation, customer experience strategy, and demand response optimization. And now, in lieu of opening remarks, I'm just going to show a short 2-minute video from Fulcrum demonstrating what AI could look like in the field. And just to note that the AI is AI is a voice, and it's talking to both you as the listener and the field worker in the video. So just want to note that. So without further ado, PJ, take it away.
Take a look with me at what the future holds when our field worker puts on his smart glasses with camera and microphone and gets started with his AI-guided experience in Fulcrum. We've arrived at pole 1734. Please look at the top so I can scan for issues.
Sounds good.
I've already guided him to the right power pole. Now I'll capture some information so he doesn't have to, still under his control, of course. No visible defects in insulators or other features.
I agree, log it.
I can help him remember what he needs to do.
Guy wire tension is good.
Okay, what about the guy wire covers?
Oh, right. Covers look good as well.
Got it. Ready for the pole itself?
Let's do it.
The pole tag should read 1734. It appears to be defective. Do you agree?
I agree. It's missing the 3.
Noted. Also, some cracking, but no major defects. Do you agree?
I agree. Log it. Hammer sound test.
There's more to all this than data capture. I help capture the right data with minimal effort, seeing what he sees, guiding him through the process.
Hammer sound is good. Probing below the soil line.
Just like I can help field workers with their jobs, I can keep the office informed of relevant field information.
Northern quadrant might need a second look. What's the SOP for reinspection below the soil line?
The manual says that potential defects should be reinspected and remediated within 30 days. Should I alert the office that pole 1734 should be reinspected using a shovel, along with a pole tag replacement?
Yeah, do it.
The pole's inspected, the status is logged, nothing was missed. This is the future of Fulcrum. We're creating an AI-guided experience for every field worker. Last inspection of the day. Pole 1735. 50 meters northward up this street.
Metal or wood?
Metal.
Sounds good. I'm going to put my belt in the truck and walk over.
You're due for a water break, too. It's 87 degrees.
Ah, good call.
Interesting. So we just watched this video where AI is guiding a technician through inspection. And, I guarantee some people watching that are thinking, yeah, I mean, that's cool, but that's 5 years out. Or, yeah, but that would never work for my team. So, Jake, how much of that skepticism is earned, and how much of what we just saw can a field team actually use today?
I think the skepticism is very well earned, because we've all been in business long enough to know that fads come and go. Things are going to come in and change the world. And maybe they do, but it takes a lot longer than people expect. If you think about, cloud, for example, cloud definitely has changed the way we do business. But it took a while for it to go from being something that people talked about to something that people actually did. So yeah, I think the skepticism is well earned. Look at blockchain too, just to name another. I'm still not sure if blockchain has that much of a application outside of crypto and stuff. But there is some of this going on right now. All the foundation of it is being worked on as we speak. So what you see here, I call it 2 years, but it's almost a kind of what's the word I'm looking for? A symbolic 2 years. The idea of 2 years means it's not happening today. I can tell you right now, I watched what one of our developers is doing with the Meta glasses just the other day. But are the Meta glasses good enough to be used in the field in that kind of industrial sort of environment? There may be some work to get there. The work being done to do all of the things that you saw there, the sanity checks. Hey, you forgot this part of the process. All of those things, those are coming together. Expect it to not happen today. Expect to have to plan for it somewhat in your infrastructure. That's why it's not like a 1 month thing. It's you've got time to think about how it fits in. You've got rapid change that is still going to have to work within the scope that you currently have. So yeah, plenty of skepticism, totally reasonable. And think of it in terms of maybe a year to 2 year kind of time frame where you're thinking about how to incorporate it in a stepwise fashion into your architecture versus something that's going to completely transform what you do overnight. I don't see that happening right away.
Yeah, definitely. Brian, you talk to dozens of utilities a year, and I know there's probably a big curve, but where are utility, most of them in their AI journey now? Is use case jail still the dominant condition?
Yeah, it is, Alex, and that's a great question. And I was also reflecting on the video for a moment. I was thinking, I could actually potentially do that job. I probably can't do the job, but if I had an assistant like that down the road, maybe I could actually, spend some time in the field. Probably too dangerous, so wouldn't want me near it. But yeah, I would say most utilities. Yeah, it's interesting. I look at kind of two chapters. So if we go back in the rewind machine a bit, 5 years or so ago, we were still focused on analytics, advanced analytics, and we were doing AI, right? So, machine learning and modeling around specific use cases. Let's say, for example, using customer segmentation data from a front office example to actually doing and building out recommendation engines using lessons learned from other industries, that like Netflix, for example, to be able to offer up the right options for the customer in the front office. It could be a payment plan, or it could be, a risk around high energy consumption. And then the next chapter, obviously, is we turned the corner and generative AI and agentic came on the scene. I think it created initially a lot of confusion. Do we still do what we were doing? Are we doing something different? And I think particularly for those utilities that, made the investments to build out their data lakes, to do the data ingestion, their advanced analytics platforms, they're in a good position to jumpstart because they've done some level of data. And we'll get into some of those conversations later. But I will tell you, probably over the past year, my colleague and I probably talked to no less than, 20 utilities, whether it's New Zealand, Australia, or the US, around where that in the journey. And there's a lot of benefit starts and stops along the way. And you're right, Alex. I think you framed it well. I like the use case jail. We're still in those early innings of the game, and we're somewhere in the middle right now. And we're starting to see, I think, more of a pragmatic approach to say, here's some things we can do around generative AI to add value, not risk getting outside the four walls of the utility. As you know, we don't want to be in the headlines with our clients, and having been a former officer at a utility. So definitely in the early stages with some leaders out there.
Yeah, great. And before we get into the next question, we already have a question while the video is still fresh in our minds about the video. Juan Ferreo, he wanted to know what the backend system was that was used in the video demo. Is the AR solution capturing all that info, or is it relaying on a work management system?
So that's a really insightful question that we could take a long time discussing. But I want you to think about what a platform is, right? A platform is a place where you can standardize your processes and data. So we're thinking about there's got to be some kind of platform the system goes into. There is no platform right now that is, that you use for enterprise asset management that would capture all of the data that you saw in the video. There is no safety management system, right? At the very end, everybody chuckles when she says, hey, you should take a drink of water too. But that's part of what we want from AI, is to build safety into everything that we do. There's no safety management system that would capture all of those elements that we saw in the video. So the back-end system for that is something like Fulcrum. And I'm not going to make a commercial for Fulcrum right now, but the idea is that you need a platform where the field can standardize its processes and data. Because when it does that, when the field does that, it's able to share that information appropriately with EAM and with GIS and with safety management systems and so on, so that all of the data is in one place, but it gets standardized and shared correctly from that place. So that backend system actually is our vision for what Fulcrum is becoming over the course of the next several years.
Yeah, and thanks for that question, Juan. And for anyone listening, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll get to them throughout the conversation. And kind of hearing you talk, Jake, there's really two sides to this story: AI being applied to field work and the need for better field data to feed AI elsewhere in the organization. So can you break that down for us? Because I think most people only think about the first half.
Yeah, and sometimes we struggle even to understand how AI should be applied to field work. If you look at what most people talk about when they talk about AI, it's things like summarizing emails. We actually, in the green room before this call, we were talking about, using AI to summarize meetings, that kind of thing. That kind of AI is not very useful for the person who's standing in front of a pad mounted transformer, right? Just doesn't help them any. So the application of AI to the problems that the field has takes a little bit of a mind shift. We have to have people like Brian sitting there saying, okay, well, I know all about the analytics stuff and I'm going to get to that, but I need to be thinking about how AI can help the field worker do their day-to-day job first, so that I can be sure that they have the right processes and we're getting the right data from them. I should note that an inspection is a data collection process inherently, but it's not just about data collection in that sense. It's also about, I'm installing a piece of equipment, I'm doing preventive maintenance. Those things should all generate data. Everything that the field worker does should generate data. And that leads us to the second part of your question, Alex, which is really, how does AI help us ensure that we're getting better data for people to be able to use downstream? And there, I think there's a variety of things that we can do. Not all of it is AI. Some of it is just good data hygiene. Some of it is just good process management. How do I make sure that people are capturing the right information every step along the way? How do I standardize those processes? How do I standardize my data collection? How do I, actually, Brian, to your point earlier, right? You said, if you had that equipment, if you had that capability, you could go out in the field and do the work yourself. That's a real problem for people who are brand new to the business. They are, we're trying to hire people because we have such a crunch on manpower. How do we get those people, the brand new rookie, to have the experience of the 20-year or 30-year veteran, right? Because doing that in the field is also going to help get the right data downstream. It's going to help make sure that we've got the right information. So that secondary part is kind of what I think of as a secondary or even sometimes tertiary effect, but it's so important because it allows us to say, here's what's been going on the entire time we've been servicing, inspecting poles or servicing transformers or whatever it is we're doing. I now have that data, and I have therefore the foundation for an AI to look at that data and answer the questions we need to have answered, to do everything from scheduling to understanding predictive maintenance to helping people plan out physically where their infrastructure is going to go, all those things. And Brian, you have a ton of experience at Exelon, I'm sure, working with analytics in that respect. Maybe you're interested in talking about that second half even more than I would.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. It's whether you're in the field or you're in the front office. And I say front office, I always think of kind of the meter to cash side of the world, and then the field operations. Bad data, captured in the field, right, becomes expensive data elsewhere, right? So you think about, a great example of, one, we got to think about the employees that are in the field. We got to think about, they're just trying to do their job. They have to be expedient about it. They have to be safe about the job that's in front of them in hitting their metrics. And I think about things like estimated restoration time and improving customer experience. When you really want to provide the right information, you're asking them to do something different, which means take a little bit of extra time to really, particularly during an outage, whether it's blue sky or dark sky or gray sky, take the extra time to put the information in there so it flows all the way upstream, that our customers then, whether we're interacting directly or through digital channels, understand really what it's going to take and the overall restoration time. So again, good cleanliness data on the front end input, which is why I think, to the point that Jake made, that the platform's so important in getting that right. You can't just keep on bolting on different applications for a field worker. There's just too many things they're focused on, and right, distraction creates safety risk. Distraction creates, productivity implications. So I think it was just having dinner last night with the CIO and thinking about, the users in the field and the front end, and was sharing with me that they're putting in a new ERP system. And as you can imagine, it's going to require, some of the field employees to think about the nomenclature different with how they categorize different assets. And one of the feedback items I had from the field was, hey, you're talking to us like white collar and we're blue collar. So you really got to think about what it means to work with the individuals in the field, the pressures they're under, the way they go about their job, the way they do their jobs, the way they collaborate together, which we're not going to get into change management right now, but that whole embracing new solutions and how it helps me do my job more effectively is really, really critical. Otherwise, they're going to be like, I don't have time for it. And no matter what we put in front of them, it's going to be like, I've got other things to worry about.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like, to your point about blue collar versus white collar, I mean, people say, I have an uncle that works for DTE. He is a retired lineman. He used to say that his crew, the way that they worked was a complete mess. But at the end of the day, they always came through and got the job done. So there is like a lot of messy data, I feel like. So how does AI kind of work in conjunction with kind of that mess that organizations already have, and how does it clean it up? And I feel like a lot of field teams might even not want it cleaned up because this is the way it's always been done and it's been working for us, even though it's a mess. So how do they reconcile that?
Yeah, let's start with that one, Jake.
So what's interesting about the question, Alex, is it's not just an AI problem, it's a data and process problem, right? So the ability for people to capture the right information, it tends to be bolted on in those situations, right? It tends to be, okay, well, I know I've got to capture the information, so I got a piece of paper and I'm going to do my checklist, and that's good enough for me. And downstream effects really aren't top of mind. We've found that the most effective companies who are out there building systems that traditional, I'm going to say older people, even though that could get me in trouble.
Resemble that comment for the record.
What's that? Yeah,
I resemble that comment. No offense taken.
They're not technologically savvy. Unlike a lot of the people who are just coming into the workforce who are technologically savvy but don't know the business as well. The companies do the best, take those people who are not necessarily as technologically savvy and go out with them in the field and actually work with them to create the systems that they use. And that's hard. That's actually a big change for people to adapt to, because they're used to being IT, and IT likes to work with specifications, and IT likes to make sure that if they're going to build something, they're going to build it in a certain way. And the iterative process frequently isn't done with somebody who's standing out in muddy boots working in the field. It's work, you do it with somebody in the marketing department. We're going to do some agile infrastructure development with finance, but how often is it with the guy with muddy boots? There's an actual person, and his name is Stump. People think I'm making fun of him. I'm totally not. That's the name he goes by. And he's the person that one of our customers pulls out into the field and says, okay, Stump, we're going to work on this together. And they take a prototype. And while Stump's out in the field, they're talking back and forth to each other to say, okay, what should we be changing? Why should we be changing it? What are we not capturing? Right? I mean, Stump's going to know stuff that the rookie isn't going to know. So what are we not capturing that Stump's able to pick up on? How can I make it easier for him? Because if I can make it easier for him, then suddenly I have a data foundation that everybody can use, because the technologically savvy people are going to be able to use it no problem. And I've got something that's going to be consistent across all of those users as much as possible. So before we even get to AI, there's that data and process foundation. And then what that data and process foundation gives you is a place for AI to work its magic. If you don't have that data and process foundation, then you're going to be asking the AI, go look at Maximo data and go look at some stuff in my data lake and go look at some stuff in my field service management application. Look at all these different places to try to tell me what's going on. And that's just so much more challenging than having a place that says, this is where the field decides what the field does and how the field is responsive to the requirements that are put upon it. So I guess it's a long answer, but it's not all about AI. It's about the foundations underpinning AI regarding data and process.
Yeah, that was said extremely well, Jake. As you're talking through that, I was thinking, it's so critical. We often think about the outcomes of analytics or AI, and we know that it can be materialized in a couple different ways, right? You could be an insight that I now go do something different with my process. It could be embedded and supportive, like in the video that we saw earlier, in the way we can really change new ways of working and really leverage this. But to your point about being alongside the folks that are actually doing the work, it is so critical. I was thinking the other day, we had years ago had deployed some enhancements in a call center in the billing system, and we were deciding where we could do all the testing and orchestration around that process. And we said, well, let's do it in the call center. So we literally, had a team in the call center in pod. Now we did get a few grievances, to be fair, because the perception was what's going on. But I will tell you, at the end of the day, what we heard from front office CSRs was, hey, you guys actually are watching what we do, and you're trying to build something that's going to help me. You're not just going to push something on me. And the same thing goes for the field, right? Again, the field folks are there doing their job. They're going to get updates from leadership in a tough, in their tough books. But they're focused on the next job and all the pressures and getting that done properly. So I think you said that really well, Jake. We've got to be out there. We've got to be close. You've got to take the folks that have been down this path for all of their career to be able to really say, hey, is there a there there in terms of the way we're building this, and is it going to be effective? And the others will follow.
Mm-hmm. Something I really like about your call center example there, Brian, is that when you sit down with the people in the call center, I'm willing to bet you that they learned why you were asking for some of the things you did. You made the point earlier that we're asking people to take more time out of their day-to-day, to do a little bit extra for you, and they don't know why, then they're not going to want to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of the stuff we've been talking about so far, it's aspirational, like pulling Stump in to build that system that's going to come out eventually. But what about a field team using AI today? Like, what is Stump using today, AI related, in the field, and what are they doing with it, and kind of how has that changed in terms of operational, maybe numbers or data?
Sure. When you look at what that vision video was at the beginning, saying where we're going, there are pieces of it that we're building that are foundational to move along the way. So one of the elements of AI that we've implemented is something we call audio fast fill. And the idea there is that frequently having your hands busy means that you're not able to fill out the form that you're working on or collect the data that you're supposed to be collecting. So, but normal speech to text just fills in your comments field. It doesn't do very much for you. So we've created audio fast fill in order for people to be able to speak into the phone and have it determine what it is you're saying and put it in the right places. So instead of you just making comments, or instead of you going back and typing with 2 thumbs later on, or clicking buttons or checking your radio boxes or things like that, you're able to just say what's going on, kind of like you saw with the glasses, and it captures the data associated with what you're saying. If some of that doesn't fit into the existing data structure, then it'll put it in comments, but most of the stuff that you're going to say probably will fit that data structure. What's really interesting is we called that, and this is, I think, something people should be aware of as they're going down an AI path. You don't always get what you expect. So when we named audio fast fill, we thought, well, this is going to be great. People are going to talk. It's going to be so much faster. It's going to be so much easier. It turns out that the real benefit isn't so much the speed, but the richness of the data. And the reason for that's obvious, but only in the rearview mirror. The reason is that if you're trying to build an app, a form, which is designed for really quick data entry, a bunch of yes/no buttons that people can tick, 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 tick down. You're hiding anything that doesn't need to be shown right this minute. You're, giving people a range of things to pick from, so it's really easy for them to pick the right range. Like, that's hard to beat from an efficiency standpoint. But what it turned out is that when people didn't have to be looking down at their phones to collect that data, they were able to capture a lot more interesting data and greater richness of data. So they're looking up at a poll they're working on, or any number of different things. They're turning the wrench on a piece of equipment. As they're talking to the phone, they're capturing additional details that weren't captured before. So that's an example. That's one example, and one of the things. It's also an example of the kinds of things that we expect to see, where you don't always get what you expect, and you adapt to see that happen. Some additional things that we're implementing right now that are related to that vision you saw is something we call photo fast fill. This time we think the fast really is the point, because you take a picture of a nameplate, and on that nameplate you've got voltage, and is it three-phase or not, and all the different elements of it, your serial number, all those different pieces, and capturing that information and again applying it to the right places in the data collection that you're doing is both more accurate, because people are not typing with two thumbs, and it is incredibly much faster than people would do that if they were collecting it on their own. So those are two examples of things that are actually happening right now, with people testing it in the field, working with Fulcrum to make these things happen, where AI is again being applied very specifically for them. These are not generic tools. These are very specific capabilities that are supposed to make their lives much faster, their activities more productive, and just as importantly, the data they capture more accurate and more timely, so that it feeds into not only their process, but all the downstream processes that can be affected by it.
Yeah, no, that's really well said, Jake. I was as you're talking about clicking on the buttons in the process, I was just thinking, especially in that mode where you're being asked to quickly categorize, you're not getting the richness of the data. It becomes just an exercise, right? And then you start to, back in the operations side of the house, looking at field productivity, you start to question whether that's even accurate. This is the richness. And then I would say the only other thing I would add is today, where, many utilities are already doing this, where AI is in action in the field, is what I would call the stump with wings. Going back to your stump example, Jake, which everyone knows here is drones. And, a lot of utilities are at different points in that journey. So they've been capturing the information, being able to do, obviously the drone inspection of that physical asset, and obviously in significant outage events, and you can add additional information and prepare for how you're going to remediate and restore power. But, what's really different now is the classification process around those images, being able to identify whether there's a defect. So we saw that, I think, in that video earlier, that marriage of all that information, and you can almost imagine that virtual, stump with wings, for bad example here, adding that additional element of insight to what we're capturing on the ground as a field worker.
He didn't know I was going to use his name today, so hopefully he's not offended by us using
that's right.
But,
may very well, trademark that at the end.
I like to call what you just described, Brian, the eyes in the sky, boots on the ground approach, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen people do this with solar fields specifically, where they use the drones to go and look at vegetation, or to look at things that to see if there's something going wrong with a particular panel. They might be flying over to see if they can spot defects from the sky. And there's a little bit of a jitter sometimes between what the drone sees and what's actually on the ground. Like there could be a shadow that's falling funny.
That's right.
The geospatial location on the drone might not be as perfect as it needs to be, so it misidentifies which panel it is. So once the thing is identified, there's still got to be somebody who goes out on the ground, make sure that the vegetation gets cleared, make sure that the fix gets done. And that 1-2 punch of eyes in the sky and boots on the ground really is a powerful way to make sure you're doing the right things, because you got the oversight from above, and that when you do the right things, you're capturing the right data and you're doing it really well, which is the process management and data collection on the ground. So really good.
Yeah,
that's a great example of the kind of thing that I think is going to get even more become more effective with AI being used more in that area.
Yeah, I totally agree. When I'm not having the good fortune to spend time with Jake and Alex here, I have a team that's been working with a company called Explorate. Doesn't compete with Fulcrum, so don't worry about that, folks. But if you get a chance, take a look at it. But it's it is interesting because there's a company called Swiss Drones. They provide a beyond visual line of sight helicopter. What's great about helicopter drones is you can really max out the payload. So LiDAR and a bunch of other different sensing equipment. And so they're doing pipeline inspection for a energy company. We're bringing that information in. We're doing the classification process. We're developing the 2-dimensional orthos, and then looking for key points of interest. To your point, Jake, is there vegetation overgrowth? Is there a truck where it shouldn't be? And then those points of interest allow their customer then to go say, yep, that's a concern and not a concern. So we're just on the tipping point of this marriage. And again, that's a great example, Jake, in the air and on the ground of where we're going to be. So it's exciting times for sure.
Yeah. Couldn't say that.
And speaking of robots, in the air, drones, we do have a question from Mohammed. He's saying, what does this integration of AI look like maybe with the working robots on the ground? And is there any future outlook of integrating that?
Well, I did see that. Wasn't there a marathon or a half marathon that was just run this past weekend? I think in China, where the robot did, cross the finish line about 5 minutes earlier than the human time. Anyways, I'm, digressing a little bit, but that's probably a little bit further out in the horizon. But you could argue that these different supportive pieces, are like robots, right? But I haven't talked to Elon Musk in a while. So.
Right. I think there's an opportunity. I think there's an opportunity for very special function robots to start soon. Like if you think about vegetation trimming, what if you had you had a substation, and at that substation you had some very limited tree trimming or vegetation trimming drones, right? They could take off. They could use, AI vision to be able to see what really needs to be trimmed. They probably are not the strongest trimmers in the world. They're not going to be like, cutting down trees or anything like that, but they could trim back light vegetation in different areas. I can totally see something like that happening. I don't think we're there yet. It's like the vision we've got showing on earlier. There are pieces that need to come together in order for that to happen. And I think a lot of hardware manufacturers kind of have to catch up. I joke, when we show the Google glasses or the Meta glasses concept, Zuckerberg needs to catch up to us on this stuff at this point. He's not ready. So I think there are places where that's developing. I think it's going to take a little time to get there. That symbolic 2 years kind of thing again.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier too, Jake, when you said, it's got to be tough PPE equipment, right? So if it's the glass, it's got to be protective. This is, it's got to be supportive in the field. And back to your example of, kind of drone capabilities, we were talking, I think it was DTEC with a Australian utility that's looking to do the drone in the box on top of the pole because they have a lot, obviously wildfire, just like we see in the West Coast here, but they have a lot of risks. And so the idea is, multiple drones, lower cost point, spread out different segments. I can go do the distribution pole inspection, or in their case, they actually have a lot of theft. some pretty aggressive theft. So the question is, could we put like a spray in there? I'm just kidding, but that could be the veg example you had, but maybe more of a proactive. But yeah, we're there. I think you're right. It has a lot to do with I think, as well as the manufacturers and making it ready. No different than we think about the evolution of smart meters in the field, or
Right.
the technology we put, reclosures of smart information that we're pulling back about the health of the distribution and transmission system.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Brian and Jake have already talked a lot about safety and how kind of that's the number one priority. Can we talk a little bit more about how AI is going to change that safety culture? Kind of what are the use cases there and how can it improve?
Sure. I'm going to go back to something I alluded to earlier, which was the need for a centralized process, because the safety, you've got a lockout tagout procedure for a given piece of equipment that you need to do some work on. Cool. That lives somewhere, and it doesn't live in the asset management platform typically, right? It lives in the safety management platform. It lives in a document, a book, a manual. So something needs to be able to tell the field, here's what you should be doing. Here are the steps of the process that you would engage in, but those steps include the safety steps automatically. And we have to recognize that sometimes the safety steps change depending on your circumstances, and you want something that's aware enough to recognize that. If it's been raining, that might not be a big deal. So you're going to go do your work because it's been raining, and you always deal with the rain. But if it's been raining and the temperature got down to, 27 degrees last night, then that might make you take extra care for, slippage, or you might need to make sure you bring some sand along with you or what have you. Those are things that people in the field will know, but they won't always think about it in the right sequence. Like, they might not grab that bag of sand before they go. And because they're already out in the field and they're already on the job, and they don't want to turn around and go back just to pick up some stinking sand, right? Like, who wants to do that? So they might skip that step. And people are rational. I know that, sometimes we say, oh, well, if you're not taking all the steps to be safe, then you're clearly not thinking straight. Well, no, they're rational. They're balancing competing interests. So how do we help them balance those competing interests in a way that safety wins the way it's supposed to? So, now AI can help you. By the way, you're packing up the truck. Great. We're getting ready to go. Grab the bag of sand because, and here's why. And AI is really good at looking at that multidimensional space that where all of the different details would probably work in the head of somebody who's a veteran. They might just know, I'm going to go do this because they've seen it so many times. The rookie might not know that. So the AI is going to help that rookie out to be safe in ways that the veteran already knows. And it's going to also piece together safety in a lot of different ways, all as part of one big process. So you've got your safety check that you're going to do on your bucket truck, which is one separate thing that's distinct from the safety check you're going to do on the transformer when you get up to the top of the pole. And AI can bring those together because it's got the context for all of that wrapped together, and it's got access to all of the information in your manuals and everything else. It knows all of it in a way that no single process otherwise does. So from a big picture, that's how I see safety being really enhanced by the application of AI to our field processes.
Yeah.
And I've never worked in the field, so let me just throw that out. Obviously spent my time in the front office. So when I think about our safety messages before every meeting, they obviously tend to be more of the, it's fall season. Remember, it can be, slippery driving because you have leaves in the ground, or, happen to be in Arizona right now. So make sure that, you look under your car before you get in, because there could be a rattlesnake, who knows? But when you get to the field, right, and we all know this is very serious, and we know folks that have had to, and especially members of teams that had to go to the hospital to be there with a crew member. So I get really excited about the prospects of AI and what it can do from a safety standpoint. And it's interesting, for years from an analytics perspective, we would use a term like 360 view of the customer. And, one of our, I had a great, was very fortunate to work at Exelon, great team, great company. But we always talked about as a team this concept of a 360 view of the job. But that was from kind of the old sense of analytics. What could I bring to the equation so that as a crew arrived, they knew either this could be, a risky area, previous soil conditions, could present additional risks or obstacles in that job they hadn't thought about. And then as we fast forward now to AI, where I get really excited about is AI really becoming that virtual member of the crew. So just like everybody on the crew and the job site has the authority to stop the work if there's a risk, and obviously for more of the junior folks, they need to know that they have that voice. But AI needs to be able to be part of that equation to say, I've assessed the situation. I know that there's a risk here. We need to stop as a crew and go back and revisit the job before we continue down the work that we have ahead of us. So to me, that becomes really powerful. And I think that if there was the next chapter of, or maybe it's the prequel to the video, Jake, and you alluded to a little bit about making sure you have the right assets to bring to the job site. It almost could be where AI is also doing the assessment of the individuals. Do I have all the right PPE equipment on?
Yep.
And it's that audit on the back end, right, to make sure that everybody was following the right process. Both from arriving at the job site to being prepared for the job ahead, and then in the environmental risk information that comes along with it.
Yeah. And I kind of want to combine what we're talking about now with a question we got from Ben. He's saying, C&E companies in Asia have been using AR helmets, Microsoft HoloLens for years in the field, but he's asking why it hasn't been incorporated with AI or utilized in North America. Is it because of that contextual awareness problem? And, kind of where are we at in that advancement today? And kind of how's that going to look?
I think this probably comes back to also the question of me saying that Mark Zuckerberg needs to catch up to us with the Meta glasses and stuff. I think one of the patterns that I've seen, and Brian, I'd be interested in hearing if you agree with this. One of the patterns I've seen in the industry, and by the way, I've never worked in the field either, but I talk to a lot of people who do. They see the need for certain kinds of investments, but until the price reaches a certain point, they don't actually make that investment the way that they would like to. So, and we saw this, if you want to go way back, we saw it with the adoption of ruggedized notebooks, right? People were like, that's just too expensive for me.
Good example.
We see that with a variety of other technologies where we're seeing people pick up on LiDAR, and there's this curve where as people adopt more, the price starts to drop. The ruggedized, the AR helmets that have been field ready have been at a higher price point for some time now, as I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that's one of the reasons that people end up not using it. It's one of the same reasons that people end up not using high resolution GPS, the GNSS devices, if you're familiar with that term. One of the reasons they don't use those is because it would cost X amount per team, and that's not worth it for the value you get from it. So what we're seeing is a combination of the scale necessary to bring down price on things like virtual reality glasses, the ability, the scale in AI necessary to embed AI into those kinds of VR glasses and those kinds of environments. We're starting to see the ability to scale down from the large language model that you need to be connected to, think of your typical ChatGPT or Google Gemini or whatever, to an on-device model that will enable you to run the right AI models on your phone or your ruggedized device, whatever it might be.
Right.
That kind of scaling down from something that's very large to something small and compact and fits on the phone. Those things together have not been available so that they can work together, or they are simply too expensive for people to think, I'm going to incorporate all of these now. So I think, Ben, I don't know if you're interested in responding to that comment. Brian, I'm interested in your thoughts on it, but I think it's that combination of scale, things coming together all at the same time, and price that really has been holding us back somewhat. And I do think we're on the verge of that changing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's that price component of it. I mean, at the end of the day, especially a regulated utility, it's about customer affordability, and what drives customer affordability is, the permission to ask for additional investment, whether it's investments to drive, reliability and resilience in the grid, or it's investments to look at other aspects of the business, either shore up back systems. And so there's always that, and you talk whether, you're a small one opco utility, let's say in Arizona or somewhere else, or you're, a Duke or an Entergy or large utilities, multiple states. You think about the size of those fleets. You're right. It is that, it's like everything else. It's that price component. When it gets to a certain point where you can say, hey, it's rugged, and let's also keep in mind our capitalization duration is much longer for equipment in utility industry than it is other industries as well. So got to get to the right price point. It's got to be able to hold up in the field, and B, we're going to depreciate that over much longer time. So it's going to have to be there and be productive and be impactful. So I think you nailed it well, Jake, in terms of some of those factors.
I'm actually thinking this relates, and by the way, Ben, thank you very much for your comment back. He agrees that what the comment makes sense. I think the combination of scale and price is becoming important in another way about the way people think about software to support the field right now too, in this sense. And the fancy term applied to this is SaaSpocalypse, because we've always got to have a cool term, right? But when we've seen AI drive down the price of code ridiculously, right? People feel like, oh, well, I can just write that. I can just ask AI and it'll generate me something that's going to capture my information. But at the same time, and similarly with the meta glasses, we saw the price of all the different things that are necessary, the video and the audio, both speaker and reception, all those things, the prices are being driven down to the point where we can actually create glasses that way. So we're seeing the price getting driven down in those areas. But at the same time, the ruggedness that Ben mentioned, those, the things that are suitable for using in the field, that is something that, it has to be driven down alongside it, because the field can't use the same stuff everybody else does. They can't use right now the meta glasses that people have. We'd like to think that they could use custom built AI stuff that they're going to build themselves. But when that happens, very often we find that it's not robust enough for what the field needs to actually do. We found this with audio fast fill. We expected it to take a certain amount of time, maybe 3 months to develop. And it took us 3 months to get it to be about 80 or 90% there. But that last 10% is a lot of work. It's a lot of effort for people to put in to make it robust enough for what we're talking about. So keep an eye on in the markets, when you're thinking about what the market is going to look like, keep an eye on that combination of what's dropping in price. So people are going to be able to do more, but also how rugged, if you want to use that analogously, how rugged is the output? How suitable for the field is the output that we're going to get when those price points drop? That trade-off is going to be a constant requirement in this industry.
Yeah, and I think another piece of this lag is connectivity. These crews sometimes work in dead zones, underground, rural corridors. So how does the field tech work in kind of offline conditions? Does it have that capability? Will it have that capability? What's going on there?
I think it will, but that again is something that takes a little time. So I mentioned talking to a developer at Fulcrum the other day, and he had just taken a model that he was able to build. He built a special model to be able to do photo fast fill offline. Now that's not production yet. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to productize that. But that, right now, the AI that we're using is generally speaking connected to LLMs by, via the cloud. So that's a requirement, and somebody who's working in the backwoods of somewhere is not going to have that capability. And that's tough. We like that needs to change. But that's going to change as phones get more capacity, as LLMs become small language models, as AI becomes, instead of this grand thing that can talk to you in French and Spanish and English and be able to talk to you about every possible topic you want to talk about, becomes, okay, focus. Here's my problem. Solve this problem for me using AI, and that gets deployed to the phone. So yeah, critical, but a challenge to get the mix of it right.
Yeah, I heard that term small language model. Can you hit on what that is and what that means?
So a large language model can talk to you about anything, right? So you log into Claude or whatever, and you can tell it, I want to program in Perl today. Oh, I want to program in Python tomorrow. I want, and then you can turn around and say, okay, tell me what's happening with, Donald Trump's tariff rebate requirement or what, like you can ask it anything. And that's why it's so large. It has so many billions of points of data that it's trillions of points of data that it's collecting and turning that into a surface that you can interact with. That it's really challenging to host that anywhere that doesn't have massive compute power. And your phone doesn't have massive compute power. This thing here, massive compared to mainframes in the 50s, but it's not enough to do that. So a small language model takes the large language model idea and crushes down all to just the things that you need. It extracts the stuff that you don't need and kind of tosses it to the side. It still will use language as the key interaction capability, but it'll be focused on more specific problems to solve. And that's why it'll be small enough to fit on your phone.
That's interesting. That is interesting. So, and kind of broadening the scope here, we talked a lot about where AI is going, where it's being used today, but I also want to talk about, where it's being used today, where it kind of falls flat in the field, where they're kind of trying to force feed it into places and it's not really working. So can we talk about a little bit about that and how it might be getting better, or are there places where it's just like not going to work plain?
I can take that, Brian. You can take that. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll let you go, and then I'll a couple of kind of assisted examples where I think we're seeing it show up.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of the places where AI is not working well in the field come from the fact that we have a mindset that tends to be focused on the office first, generally speaking. I mean, that's just what we know, so that's where we focus our energy. The types of use cases or mentality about what use cases we're solving are different from what the field needs. But at the same time, the vendors that you work with every day are all being told you need to have AI mixed in. Like you better have an AI strategy or else the competition is going to eat your lunch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I said at the very beginning of this conversation, Alex, that I think that the skepticism is well-deserved when people talk about AI. And this is one of the reasons, because marketing people, I know I have a marketing title, but marketing people drive me crazy because they have to find a way to fit this buzzword into the set of things they're doing, right? So you got to have AI in your toaster to get just exactly the right toast. So I think there's some of that going on where the field is being told, here's AI that's going to help you. Well, one I know of is I'm going to summarize what the customer's issue is as you're on the way out to the customer. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, but does it really help the field worker in the way that they need the help? Is it the place that the field worker needs help? It totally makes sense that a CRM company would do it. It totally makes sense that it would be of value to the field worker sometimes. So the feature sounds good, but does it really matter? And I think that's really the question we've got to be asking ourselves. It's not so much, is it failing the field worker, is it being done, but it doesn't matter to the field worker. It's just cluttering things up instead of really making their work more effective, more productive somehow. So I think that's really what we got to be looking at. Really, it's more about us and our mindset than it is about what AI can do per se.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's as you're talking, it's the crawl, walk, run approach. We've the good fortune to work with a large renewables company, and the team has been doing some fantastic work, both Decline and Slalom. And one of the things they're doing is, supporting on the renewable side, the service planners. And so if you think about service planner today, it's I got a combination of emails I need to ingest and think about. There's still some traditional voice capture information, believe it or not, from phones and voicemails. So it's, that effort's all about how do you kind of bring bits of information together using generative AI with some agentic capabilities to kind of assist them in that job. But that's not, your traditional hardcore, regulated field utility worker that is now doing some significant, long cycle work, whether it's putting new pad mount transformer in or, putting new poles in and those type of things, and all the elements that go along with it. But I think in those cases where we're deliberate and we're specific and we can assist the current job, sets up the path then to be more receptive to the, later stages of AI enablement that really support what they do. And so it's, I think, those baby steps along the way that start to drive value. And then to your point, Jake, I was trying to get coffee earlier in the Slalom office here, and it's one of those that has like espresso, it has lungo, Americano. And I was thinking, like, if it had AI, it would just look at me and say, hey, you didn't have a good night's sleep. You probably just need a big cup of coffee, very strong, not too hot. But the computer vision with the coffee machine is not quite there yet. So anyways, I digress.
No, that's great. That's great.
I feel like the other side of things I see is, this is a pretty conservative industry, utilities.
Really? I'm just joking.
And a lot of the technologies that they use are, in many senses, outdated. And so what's to say that AI, they adopt it today, and 2 years from now, 3 years from now, it's outdated, but, they're not going to go to the next big thing because, it's kind of sunk cost fallacy at that point. And, they've put all this time and resource and investment into this and training. So how should they think about making these investments into AI that won't be obsolete by the time they're deployed even?
Yeah, I may take a first pass and I'll have Jake clean it up on the back end. But I mean, I think back to, clients I've worked with, and certainly being in the, other seat where you're actually making significant investment decisions, and you're partnering with your IT organization. And I was very fortunate to have some great IT partners along the way. And, it's always wearing that optionality hat, right? And so, even if you rewind several years ago, if you're making a big, obviously there's big investments that utilities make, whether it's a, new billing system, an ERP system, those are complex projects. They're always, in the radar, and everyone want to make sure they go extremely well. But as we see this emerging set of capabilities and vendors coming on the scene, I think having that partner that understands that, they're orchestrating the capabilities, that, they're going to be able to plug in as the next generative or agentic vendor comes along. They're working with that, right? They have, full integration and awareness to all the different, internal tools that make the utility run, whether it's, work asset management, or, as I mentioned, ERP and other capabilities. The black box approach, while it always sounds great, and I've been down this path, and if I could just give someone all of my data and they're going to give me all the insights, I love the idea. Maybe there's some golf in the future if that would work well, but I don't see that always playing well at the end of the day. So as a leader, and I think this is where you see a lot of your CIOs, utilities want to make sure that they have optionality. And so, like I said earlier, utilities that had made the investments to go build a data lake early on, you could probably make the argument, was that a good thing in light of, new data orchestration techniques, and being able to extract information and then present it. I still think it certainly wasn't throwaway. It was absolutely critical. And again, the more data you have, particularly as you train and develop these models in this new generation of AI capabilities, is absolutely critical. But optionality has got to be always on the radar.
Optionality is huge, especially given the rate of change of things right now.
Totally.
I mean, if you plan on using this specific model and you build something that depends on that model, by model, I mean, is it like ChatGPT, Claude, or whatever, then good luck. Like you could easily see a company go out of business spectacularly in the future. So you need to be very, like, optionality is everything. Um, I like what you said, Brian, is really good. I like everything you said. I'm gonna turn it on a little bit to talk about almost from a personal level
Yeah.
what the bets should be like, because that's what you're doing. Anytime you explore a new technology, you're placing some kind of a bet. You're putting in resources,
right.
money, and time, and people, and like you're making a bet. I think it's good to bet big enough, but not too big. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times, especially when you're working with a small group and a small team, they'll try to get buy-in by doing something cool with some new cool technology. And when they do that, they don't want to bet their job on it, so they'll do something small. And that sounds good from a risk perspective. But if you did something so small that it's not risky, it probably also wasn't worth very much.
Yeah.
So you need to think about, okay, what can I do that will actually make a difference so that somebody will look at it and say, yeah, we should fund more of that. Start thinking in those kinds of terms. And that happens at all levels. Like if you're at a small level on a team and you're just trying to be scrappy, think about it at that term for your team. If you're the, CIO or C-level executive, think about it at that level from your entire business. But think about, have a use case, have thoughts about what you can actually accomplish, and then place a bet that's big enough that isn't going to necessarily, make you buy the farm if you fail at it, because failures are going to happen, like they just will. So anyway, that's kind of the personal perspective on what should you be doing, right? It's because we're all doing this in the context of the jobs that we have. So from that perspective, like bet big enough.
No, totally, Jake. And I think you mentioned earlier in the conversation around as you guys started to deploy capabilities, your original intent of what that use case was going to provide pivoted, right, in terms of value. And that's really AI and analytics in a nutshell, right? You can, well-defined use case. A good example, one of the things that I've really enjoyed, since my time here at Slalom is, and having lived through, now obviously I'm not, a regulatory leader in a utility, but watching that process and that machine for the regulatory, process that has to evolve. And then, as a business executive, making sure that you're also providing updates to your different regulatory teams. And then you add a multi-opco scenario where you're trying to line up all the different filings and how to make that happen. And we saw an opportunity at Slalom to build what we call Drift, but it's a digital regulatory intelligent filing tool just to help with that process. So it started with generative AI, which is, within the four walls. We don't want any type of hallucination or information, but what you tell it and feed it is going to help you in that process. But being able to look at other regulatory filings and say, hey, this is how what utility was able to justify their wildfire investments, or start to apply personas that might reflect different individuals and how they look at it. But the adjacent to the point where you deliver something that you don't expect, in our case with Drift has been the ability to support RFP development. So if you're a small company and you're getting started, we're talking with a battery company, and you're focused on those big opportunities and you want to respond to those, but you got a lot of other RFPs as well. Use these capabilities, and so there's a lot of adjacent value that comes out of, to your point, Jake, make the investment and make sure that you're being smart about it, but it's going to open up a lot of other opportunities and a lot of additional adjacent use case outcomes you didn't expect.
And I think that's true of technology in general, right? I mean, you were the chief analytics officer at Exelon, if I remember right. And if you build a good database, if you build a good data warehouse, if you build a good analytical system, people will start to realize, oh, I can get more out of it than I originally expected. And maybe you tune it along the way. You say, okay, in order to get that, I need to add more data into it or whatever it is. Yeah. But when you start to see, and we see this at Fulcrum, we start with one use case and people say, okay, here's a bunch of other things that bubble up from the field. Say, oh, I could also use it for toolbox talks. That I think as technology develops, you're always going to see that. So we just need to be ready for that. We've learned that lesson as an industry. We just need to be ready for the fact that we're going to see this kind of change as the technology develops.
Yeah, and I think the no matter what folks do on this call here in their journey, that parallel work stream, whether you want to call it change or awareness, but the parallel work stream to raise the AI IQ within the organization so that as you're deliberately going after use cases, you've now brought other members of the organization through awareness of what AI is, and they can start to say, "Oh, here's a good use case.
Yep.
Here's how I could, apply this," or "Here's how I could do this safely in my current job, and drive efficiency in what I do today." I will tell you some of the, and again, I'm very fortunate to have a great team, and working in a multi-opco environment, you see the innovation that happens in each operating company. But some of the coolest use cases came from our folks in different operating companies through, some of the analytics academy we did, or, some of the Slalom clients where we really focused on change and culture and, AI IQ. What they're accomplishing and delivering often is out delivering what that, more meaty use case was, in terms of the impact that they can have.
Yep.
Yeah, and Brian, how much of that has to do with kind of like an AI-friendly governance structure? Because, there's a lot of sensitive information in being put into these tools sometimes, and I feel like a lot of
Yeah.
leaders
Yeah.
might be like, don't really want to
Yeah.
do that. So how big of a role does governance play in that, and like what are the guardrails that should be set around that?
Yeah, it's huge. And I've heard plenty of stories. I won't talk about them here, but that's been part of the problem, right? I mean, let's say AI aside for just a moment and think about, the CISO function, the utility, or the IT organization having to worry every day about either another partner vendor who had a cyber attack, and then the response is, okay, are we impacted in our in our suite of applications? And then if we are, what does that mean for business continuity? Are we not going to be able to get bills out the door? And what are we going to do about that? So that was before AI. Now you add AI, and those that have kind of dipped their toe into it and had some real issues with it, either both internally or good intentions gone bad. I'm going to take information, but I forget about the four walls because I want to do a better job, and that gets out there. That's a real problem. But I think it's I think there's the governance and the awareness piece of it that has to be in place, but I think you still need the stick as well. And think about cyber. Utilities I've worked at, and I know a lot of utilities do this. They have phishing campaigns to make sure that as employees, you're paying good attention to emails you get. You're not clicking on things you shouldn't click. And oh, by the way, if you are habitual problem with clicking on potential real phishing risks, then you know what? There's impact on your bonus. And obviously, if you do too much, there's not a place for you here. And I think there's a lot of companies that are coming on the scene, like Portal 26 is a company that we've been talking to that are looking for those edge cases where they're just like we're monitoring for potential cyber risk or threats. You're monitoring for where AI may have gone out or around the edges of the way we've defined the enterprise system, which should be closed off, but starting to identify where those risk points are. So it's that next layer of risk intelligence around AI to make sure that we're not going off the rails. You want to encourage, but we don't want to end up in the headline.
Yeah.
Yeah, media is not good. Unless it's good news.
Yeah, I think that ties into another question. Ben, again, has had a question about kind of the adoption of AI and kind of the pushback in the mainstream, and that's kind of affecting not just utilities, but all industries. And so how do we see this in utility industry among the field personnel? And I'm thinking of like the goofball that is kind of messing with the AI, or somebody that's even using it for a more nefarious purpose. And so how do we kind of address that fight and kind of work towards getting everyone on the same page?
It can be tough. I mean, as a vendor, we're trying to put AI into all the places that make sense, we think, for the field, and talking to our customers, seeing where they think it makes sense and trying to apply AI in all the right places. But at the same time we're doing that, there are other organizations that say, I don't, can I turn this whole thing off? I don't want any AI. I don't want my data touched by AI. I don't want any AI capabilities in the platform. So you see a big range of reactions to what AI should do, whether it should, be part of your strategy, how it's going to be implemented. I think that's natural, especially in such a conservative industry. I think we're going to see a lot of change over time. I mean, we've already seen a lot of change over time. People who were a year ago saying, I don't want any of that stuff, are now saying, I really need to figure out how to use this. And at the same time, you also see skeptics who, I just saw that Anthropic's model that was so powerful that it couldn't be released because it was going to be able to attack all of the exploits possible in every operating system and web page and browser. Well, turns out somebody's had it. They were able to hack it out of Anthropic, and they've been using it for a couple of weeks. So there's a lot of, the people who are risk averse see that and are like, heck no, I'm not touching this stuff. I don't have a single answer for that. I think that a lot of it comes down to what the organization that you're in has a tolerance for. And the organization is bigger than just your company. It's also your ecosystem. If you're an AEC, it's your utility partners. If you're a utility that includes your AECs and your regulators, like it's not one thing. So, and Brian, I don't know if you've had some strategic discussions about this with people in your among your client base, but it seems to me that it's a very broad range right now for us to be considering.
Yeah, it really is. It's interesting when I always we always talk about like the horizon of adoption. I often will put together a point of view, and then I always step back and say, all right, let me add a couple years to that in terms of adoption, right? Just because, to your point, Jacob, all those other factors, it's the same debate around moving to the cloud, right? You think about, one, can we get over the capitalization discussion, in terms of being able to, migrate application to the cloud, and then two, is it safe? And I remember in the early days, it was, well, wait a minute. We have government institutions that have highly, secure data, and they use it cloud all the time. So why aren't we as a utility? Now, obviously, you're a different, level of security around that. But I think we're in a similar place. Jake, it's, I always add, like I said, a couple of years to the horizon, just from a practicality standpoint, how quickly we move or don't move. And, there's always going to be those utilities that are going to be the head of the pack. This is what's great about, I love our industry, is that we share, for the most part. Sometimes that's not always the case, but just whether it's this forum today, Energy Central, or whether it's other forums where we can, talk about what we're doing together, how we're approaching it, and then learn from each other in the process. Some utilities always want to be first to be second, and that's perfectly fine. Pragmatic approach makes a lot of sense.
Your comments, Brian, remind me of a time I was giving a talk to in person, back when we did things in person. Remember those? Where
Go figure.
it was like 40 people in the financial services industry, so a little bit different industry, but still very highly regulated, still very concerned about security, right?
Yeah.
And this was at the time where the cloud was really starting to take off. And it reminds me of this conversation for two reasons. First, because it was they were worried about connectivity, right? They were talking about cloud. Yep. They were worried about connectivity, and because it was very conservative in its approach. And somebody said to me during the Q&A period, well, it seems to me that the cloud is just somebody else's computer. There is no cloud, there's just somebody else's computer, which you may remember if you've been around the block a while. This is like an old slogan. And I said, yeah, but you got to think about it this way. You can think of a bank as being just somebody else's mattress, right? Where are you putting your money? Oh, I'm putting it in my mattress. Okay, well, why am I doing that? Because I can keep it safe, because I've got control over it. Nobody can touch it. It's all good. But people use banks because I can write checks. I can be anywhere in the world. I get all these other services. I've got all the connectivity, like here or in Tokyo. I can use my debit card. There's all these things that I can do because I have a bank instead of just my own mattress. So calling a bank somebody else's mattress is it kind of as denigrating in its way as calling the cloud somebody else's computer is. And there's some analogy here with AI. AI is not intelligent in the way that we are. It is a pattern matcher. And so people denigrate the pattern matching, and with some good reason.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that pattern matching is able to do some incredible things that have advanced just in the past 3 or 4 years that we would just
Right.
find mind-blowing. So figuring out the right way to use it, figuring out, okay, I moved from a mattress to a bank. I moved from my, my own servers to the cloud. I'm moving from no AI to adopting AI. There will come a point, and you have to be looking for it. There will come a point where your organization will say, you know what, the benefit here is probably higher than the risk. The risk actually becomes not advancing fast enough by using the
That's very
technology
true.
that's available to me. And I
Yeah.
think that's the question we've got to be asking for ourselves is, where's the risk? Is the risk not moving fast enough, or is the risk in moving too quickly with the technology as it currently exists?
And I will tell you, Jake, as you were talking about the Anthropic example, I was on Amazon buying a mattress because I will now be stuffing those mattresses with any money that I do have. Well, my kids,
No doubt.
my daughter plays hockey, so there's not a lot of money, but I'll be
Right.
stuffing whatever I can in mattresses now. I'm worried about
There
that.
you go.
Thanks a lot, Jake. Appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome. Anytime I can make your day brighter, you let me know.
Exactly.
Yeah. Before we get into the final question, I just want to put up a poll real quick, just a quick minute. PJ is going to pop that on your screen. If you could just fill that out, then we'll close this baby out.
Thanks. I really appreciate, as the sponsor for the webinar, I really appreciate everybody, being here to talk about these things. I'm here for a reason. I'm here at Fulcrum for a reason. I love what we do, and I think we provide a lot of value for our customers. But regardless, I hope that you find what we're talking about interesting, the application of AI interesting, the strategy, the requirements, both technological and personal. There's just a whole lot going on right now that I think is really fascinating, and I'm really happy to have all of you here. We know you had other things you could do today, and we appreciate you taking the time out to have this conversation with Brian, Alex, and me.
Yeah, I echo that as well. Okay, great. Okay, finally, just wrapping it all up, actionable takeaways. So if someone watching this kind of, has a field team, 50 people, kind of a pile of inconsistent data, zero AI experience, what's the single first thing they should do tomorrow morning to kind of get on this train?
Start. It's a terrible answer, but it's kind of the answer. Start. What does start mean to you is then the next question. I think that to advance with AI at any point, you're going to need two things. You're going to need data that the AI can access, that the AI will be able to understand and use to help you in the future, and some codification of process. In Fulcrum, we're doing that because we own that process for the field. Like, the whole thing is that process. But even if you don't have that, even if you're trying to start off in little ways, the AI will be able to help you so much more if it understands the context of the data that it's seeing. So start building something, working with someone, creating somehow a way to make the data that you have a little bit more rigorous. Just don't make it perfect, get it better every day, and to create the process context that the AI can use to help you by using that data. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. You got to get started. I mean, I remember back, working in clients in my early consulting days when we were just talking about analytics, to having been in a position to think about it more broadly. And there was always a lot of debates that you would say, well, wait a minute, we shouldn't go do advanced analytics because we're putting another system in, and let's wait till that's settled. There's always going to be something on the horizon in our industry in particular. So yeah, you can't wait, but you still need to do the right things along the way. You still need to think about governance, but you don't want that to slow you down. You still need to be thinking about raising the AI IQ in your organization so everybody understands it, and it helps drive those guardrails. So yeah, get started for sure, and don't think any use case is too small. I mean, it could be as simple as taking safety inspection data from the field and doing some generative AI analysis and classify information. Anything you can do to leverage the tools, even in the basic sense, beyond the more advanced examples we saw in the video to drive value, there's value there for the utility. So definitely get started. And I'm sure 90% are already doing something here on the call as well.
Seems likely enough.
Yeah.
Great. I just want to open the floor just to you, Jake and Brian, if there's any last thoughts or comments that you have before we wrap this up, and I'll pass it back to PJ.
My only final comment would be really about the value of the data and process that I just talked about. People don't necessarily understand the field. IT is not used to supporting the field the way that they understand how to support other people. It's not their fault. It's just not what they're trained on. They've never been out in the field. So for me, like I said, part of the reason I'm with Fulcrum right now is I see the value in having a place for the field to do its work, a platform for the field to own its data and its processes. And I'm not saying you need to use Fulcrum to do it, but I think you need to be focusing on how to get that process started of improving your data quality, the rigor of the processes that you use to get that data, and the processes, the documentation of the processes, or the understanding of the processes that you use to get it. And that's going to help you start to find the use cases where AI can actually make a difference.
Absolutely. And I won't, dwell on that too much, but what I will say is that, it's, like as we said early on, probably been to 20 or so utilities, talking with all levels of leadership on down over the past year. So it's happening, and, very fortunate to be able to do that from a Slalom perspective, but also to spend time with folks like Jake and companies like Fulcrum that are out there in the field. And, that's an area that, I think we just can't do enough. And, that, like I said, this is, not here to pick a vendor, but I wouldn't be here if I also didn't feel that, they're making an impact as well. And certainly something to keep on the radar.
Thanks, Brian.
Great. Thank you both so much. It was a very insightful conversation for me. I learned a lot.
Thank you, Alex. Great moderator.
Yeah, great job, Alex.
Thank you.
And as I jump in here, I want to thank you all for participating. Fantastic event, as a matter of fact. Thank you for our audience for coming on aboard, and of course, Fulcrum. Thank you for making the event possible. For our audience, please keep an eye on your inbox for that replay. And if you can, take a moment, fill out our survey, let us know what you thought. And from everyone here at Energy Central, thank you for spending a part of your day with us. We'd like to, can't wait to see you on the next event. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, and have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.